Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our introduction to the White House Fellowship. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. And in fact, I'd like to say that the response to this invitation has been strong across the country, and that gives great inspiration to those of us who care deeply about the fellowship program. My name is Janet Abrams, and I was a White House Fellow during the Clinton administration, and it was a transformational year for me. And it's been a privilege after the fellowship to be involved in alumni activities such as our effort to make sure that the White House Fellowship is known in every corner of the country. And so we're very appreciative that you've joined us tonight. I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C., just a few miles northwest of the White House itself. And I am joined by 5 of my fellows who each has an outstanding story. And I hope y'all will bear with me as I share slides. You'll see these great folks with their names, pictures, and class years arrayed here. But let me get to the real fun activity, which is to welcome them live and in person to the Zoom stage here. And I'd like to just welcome each one to say hi and let us know a bit about where they are, when they served. John Tien.
Hi, thanks very much. Yeah, thanks very much, Janet. Appreciate not only you, but the entire White House Fellow Association team for bringing this all together. And so great to have all of you come on to the Zoom and learn more about the really premier leadership fellowship in the United States of America. As Janet says, you can see by the photo, my name is John Tien. I was class of 1998, 1999, and served in the second term of the Clinton administration. I'm coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia, recently very rainy. And our hearts and our prayers are out there with everybody in the Southeast who were impacted by the hurricane. Thank you.
Agree. Vanessa.
Hi, everyone. Vanessa Covarrubias. I am in the deepest part of South Texas, and I served under the Biden administration 22-23.
Great. And Jeffrey Kong, my classmate.
All right, way to go.
Yay.
Dr. Jeff Kong, I'm the CEO of a company called Welby Senior Medical. Welcome to my living room in Chicago. And I actually, my full-time residence is in Florida, and I served in the Clinton administration with Janet.
Great. Welcome. Thanks for representing the Middle West. And now we have Travis Matheson.
Thank you, Janet. Yes, my name is Travis Matheson. I served in the George W. Bush administration, end of his second term in 2007. And I am in Seattle, about an hour south of Seattle in Washington State.
Neat. And Warren Morgan.
Hello, everyone. Warren Morgan. I served in the 2016-2017 year, so a transition fellow, because I was appointed in the Obama administration and then finished out in the Trump administration. I currently serve as the Chief Executive Officer for Cleveland Metropolitan School District here in Cleveland, Ohio.
That's great. Thanks, y'all. I would like to recognize a couple of other people that are helping make this webinar run behind the scenes. We have 2 additional alums of the program, Mac McFarland and Elizabeth Gillis. Mac in San Diego and Elizabeth in Washington, a neighbor of mine. I'd also like to recognize Jen Anschel, who's the communications manager for our Alumni Association. And Jen now is unbelievably helping make this webinar a beautiful program when she has just had to leave her home in Asheville, North Carolina, due to the impact of Hurricane Helene. And thanks to John for mentioning how concerned we've been for Jen and so appreciative that she's safe and that she keeps waving the White House Fellows flag through thick and thin. And we want to say to all of you out there who may also have been affected that we're wishing you well in your recovery from the damage. So we'd like to move on to the agenda. Tonight, it's a simple agenda. We'll give you an overview of the fellowship program. Then we're going to move into alumni reflections on the fellowship experience. And I'd like to say that we have a really great, diverse group here who were assigned to different departments and agencies as fellows, came into the program with different backgrounds, and have gone off to do all kinds of great things, different things, and now also represent geographic diversity, as you heard in their introductions. We will, after I ask a few questions of my colleagues here, and it's a lot of fun for me because I get to learn about them more than, I know a little something about each one, but more about all of them. We will field a few of the questions that come in from the audience. And I'd like to suggest that you, if you have a question, you can type it into the Q&A function on your Zoom screen. The chat function is disabled for the audience this evening, but you can use that Q&A function. And some of the questions will be answered in writing, and a few will be teed up for the panel to address. And it's all needs to be within our time constraint, of course, but we'll get to each question somehow. We'll wrap up with highlights of resources available to you where you can get additional information. So to begin the fellowship overview, we have a video for you to watch that gives you a sense of the 60-year history of the White House Fellows Program, which is pretty amazing. So this lasts about 3 to 4 minutes, and here we go. I hope you enjoy it.
What we're trying to do is to find here in this country, yes, here in the White House Fellow, a combination of an idealist with vision and a pragmatist with judgment.
This program goes back for 55 years and stretches across all departments of government and presidencies and administrations. And it's an incredible program, and I hope everyone listening will encourage others to apply, to learn more about this. It's something that everyone should know about, even though they may not be a fellow themselves. It's a rich part of the White House tradition, and we're very grateful to President Johnson and those around him for establishing this program.
Founded in 1964, this prestigious program puts the best and brightest physicians, military officers, academics, business leaders, and others to work in the highest levels of government. With direct access to the White House, cabinet secretaries, and world leaders. Many of its alumni have gone on to greater achievement. Colin Powell, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, Senator Sam Brownback, Paul Gigot of the Wall Street Journal, to name just a few.
I learned most of all how you champion good causes and how you stand up and fight causes that are not good, how you take risks for doing that which is right. And so for me, it was a very formulative experience, one that I've treasured ever since.
Year after year, I've enjoyed working with the White House Fellows. Each and every one brings a variety of talents and energy into the government, and in many ways represents my best hopes for our future.
What kind of person do I think should apply for the program? I think would be someone who is committed to servant leadership, just as John Gardner would have said, someone who is ready to give back.
My assignment at the White House Fellowship, I was at the Department of State under then Secretary of State Colin Powell.
Not a bad place to be.
Not too shabby. Someone up there was looking out for me. General Powell was incredibly generous with his time and his words. To see the commitment to our country was not only inspiring, but I think it also taught me the lesson that public service is a way of life.
And we expect a lot out of you. Expect you to go back to your units or your businesses or your universities or perhaps government agencies and lead, to set high standards, to set a good example, and to serve something greater than yourself. That's what the Fellows Program is all about.
I had this amazing fellowship year. I worked for the First Lady, Hillary Clinton at the time. I think what was interesting is in the beginning of the fellowship, you're sort of trying to find your way and you do everything. And then all of a sudden, by the midpoint of the year, someone comes up to you one day and says, we have a speech for the First Lady tomorrow. Do you want to write it? It's just these sudden baptisms throughout the year that are wonderful. You feel like you're absolutely not prepared. You can't do it in some ways, and then all of a sudden, you're doing it. And when a year goes by, you can't believe it's over. I think in many ways, the year as a White House Fellow has shaped the rest of my life.
Oops, sorry. I didn't mean to click that again. Let's see if I can go back and go forward. There we are. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video. There's really a lot there and some wonderful memories for a number of us who had the chance to be around the people who were featured. I'll walk through a few slides now that present the basics of the fellowship. As you heard, this is the nation's premier nonpartisan leadership development and service opportunity. And our mission, it's been this way for 60 years since President Johnson established it, is to develop and strengthen future leaders for the betterment of our communities and our great nation. We've had almost 900 individuals selected as White House Fellows, serving in 11 administrations over 6 decades. It's pretty amazing, pretty amazing to think about it. It's weathered so many changes in our federal government. There is a presidential commission on White House fellowships that's appointed at the beginning of an administration, and that commission has oversight over the White House Fellows program, and it selects the fellows. Or rather, I should say, it recommends a class to the president for approval to participate in the program. The work assignment each person has is at the highest levels of government. It's 1 year, it's a paid position, and it is in Washington, D.C. Some people wonder, do I have to live in Washington? Because we're all used to a world now where you can link in via great technology like Zoom, but you need to be here in Washington. Each class of fellows numbers between 11 and 19. The class Jeff Kong and I were in, we had 17. It was a great group. And you have, in addition to your work experience, an array of opportunities to learn and develop through the year. Eligibility rules. You must be a U.S. citizen. Federal government employees are only eligible if they are career military personnel. So if anyone is a civil servant out there, unfortunately, this program isn't for you, but there are many others to consider, certainly. And applicants need to have completed their undergraduate education by the time of the application. Selection criteria. This is what the commissioners are looking for. A record of remarkable professional achievement early in your career, evidence of leadership skills and potential for growth, demonstrated commitment to public service, Really, community service could be at any level of government, and it need not be government, but it's public, that you care about your community and your country. Skills to succeed at the highest levels of the federal government, and an ability to work effectively as part of a team. Here is the calendar for selection. And this is the calendar for this coming cycle. The application window opens November 1st. You have November, December, and just through New Year's to submit the application. Then there's a review process that goes on for a couple of months, January, February, March, and in March, regional finalists are selected and notified. In March and April, there is a series of day-and-a-half-long interview events for the regional finalists, and the panelists for those interviews are really esteemed fathers, mothers, leaders of those regions. And so it's an exciting experience to go through the regional interviews. And then from that process, national finalists are selected, and those national finalists will go, it's already been scheduled, to the selection weekend that is hosted by the President's Commission on White House Fellowships in late May. And the product of that entire program is the recommendation of a new class of fellows to the White House. And those individuals are notified. They come back to Washington for what we call Placement Week, where folks interview with leaders within the administration who have expressed interest in hosting a White House fellow in their office, and there's a matching process. And then in late August, the fellowship year begins. And so that would be the class of 2025-26. Here's an image of the class that just wrapped up their fellowship year, just to give you a sense of the smiling faces that you'll see in most White House Fellows class. It's such a great experience. Most people are smiling in these pictures. And here's the class right before it. Vanessa, I think we see you there as a member of this great class of 22-23. So I'd like now to move into the reflections portion of our program, alumni reflections. And I'm going to stop sharing slides. Here it says stop share, yay. And now I'm excited to ask my fellow fellows a few questions about their experiences as White House Fellows. And I'd like to start, if I might, with Vanessa, our most recent fellow, and Jeff Kong, who I'll venture to say is the dean of our group here, because he and I were in the class, the earliest class that's represented here. So Vanessa and Jeff, you both are healthcare professionals. And I think it would be great for our audience to hear a bit about your work assignments, because they were different. And wondering how those experiences perhaps have influenced your career after the fellowship, or for Vanessa, because you're very recent, you're thinking about your career going forward. So the audience knows Vanessa is a physician's assistant, and she is the first PA ever named a White House Fellow, which is a tremendous achievement, because I personally love PAs and they've been very helpful in my life. You were assigned to the Department of Health and Human Services. It sounds like a natural fit, given your background. I don't know if it was an assignment you sought in that placement week process, but you wound up there, and I'd like you to share with us perhaps any highlight, what comes to mind when you think about walking into HHS, or perhaps there was one very important day in that role? If you could speak a bit about that image you have in your head, what was that experience like for you, and how has the HHS placement influenced your thinking about your own future in healthcare? And I'll say to the audience, as I'm asking my colleagues, we're all going to try to be brief, and I need to be briefer with questions, but that's, you have two there, Vanessa. Take it away.
Well, actually, I had a dual placement. I was at HHS and I was also at the Office of the First Lady.
Oh, great.
I was on the cancer moonshot policy team with Jill Biden. And the story that comes to mind, I really feel like I lived out John Gardner's dream. The Office of the First Lady, when I was in the office, was focusing on patient navigation for cancer patients. And I did not expect to be on both sides of the table. What I mean is I was sitting with the policy team, hearing everybody coming to the White House from all over the US saying, these are our problems as a cancer patient or as a family member of a cancer patient. While I was in the Office of the First Lady, I had an uncle succumb to pancreatic cancer, and I was taking care of him via DC to Texas. And then my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer at the end of my fellowship. Wow. So I got to sit on both sides, and I got to, John Gardner's dream was we would go up to the highest levels of government, go back home, and how do we make a difference? And my mother and I, she's survived double mastectomy stage 1, thank God. But we started up our own nonprofit to service patients with breast cancer, but it's a survivor-led patient navigation program. So I took the needs of the government to home, and I've done that throughout different parts of, civic engagement and being a PA coming back into town. So that was the moment, and that's highlighted the best.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful to hear. I'm sorry if it was your uncle who passed away, and sorry for that. And
thank you.
Glad to hear about your mother's status. Jeff, my question for you. I know Jeff as a 1 in a zillion doctor of the highest quality who has devoted himself to caring for seniors. You've done this with patients, you've done this in government, you've done it in corporate settings, and you mentioned the company WellBe Senior Medical that you lead today. I recall you're also, like Vanessa, having multiple assignments, Jeff, that you were at the Small Business Administration and at HHS as well. And a question for you, if you would, is to talk a bit about your placement at small business. What was that like for you? Folks from the outside might have said, what is he doing there at the Small Business Administration? A bit about your experience as a doc who I don't think had founded a small business up to that time. Maybe you had, but we didn't know about it. And then also, is there a lesson learned or relationship you forged that carried on with you from the SBA experience?
Yeah, so maybe what I'll do is just quickly, it is a little unusual for a physician. I was a 10-year practicing physician to be at the SBA. Just to help the audience understand, that was the year of healthcare reform. And it actually turns out the majority of the uninsured in this country are employees of small businesses. Wow. So the connection was we were going to form what's called group purchasing co-ops, get small businesses to purchase healthcare just like a large company like Boeing. Or, it's interesting. I think the most important thing is there were 3 physicians in our class. Yep. And everyone, of course, wants to go to HHS. But the way I thought about it was it's just an experience. It's all about the experience. And it's all about the collegiality. It's all about meeting other government officials, other agencies, and getting other experiences. So in particular, the Small Business Administration was interesting. I'm a doc.
Yeah.
But I got an opportunity to sit in the National Economic Council and represent the agency on the National Economic Council. So it was a very interesting experience for me to learn more about macroeconomic policy, which I never would have dreamed of.
Wow. Wow. So interesting. It's so interesting. And you did have, that was just an exciting year with the focus on healthcare reform. Appreciate hearing about that. And I know you've gone on to work in big business and now a new business. I won't call it a small business that you're leading, but a new one. Let me move to John now. John, well, let me say to the audience first, for some who may not know, but you probably gathered from the video, the White House Fellowship is distinctive in that each class has a mix of civilians and members of the military. And there are many fellowship opportunities that one can pursue in Washington, but this is a very special feature of the White House Fellowship. John, you came as an Army officer to the program, and I'm wondering what it was like for you to be working and learning among primarily civilians, some of whom may have known little about the military before they even met you. And I should mention that, and you said this briefly in your introduction, is that for the audience, John has served since his fellowship in many positions in government, and most recently was the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And in that role, John has sponsored fellows, had fellows working directly for him, yes, I believe, yes, and has also been supportive of the program in many ways, more generally. So a question for you is just to speak to this mix of civilian military and perhaps a little bit about your own encounters with your classmates, what they learned from you, what you learned from them.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that, Janet. And as Vanessa knows, I spoke to her class at the round table at 712 Jackson Place. And one of the things I often say, or I say it to every class that I speak to, whether it's the deputy secretary or just as an alum, actually echoes what Jeff just spoke about, which is, doctor, SBA, doctor, PA, HHS. Okay, those are good fits. But in actuality, as I said at the very outset, the White House Fellowship is the premier leadership fellowship. So the focus is the outcome that the White House fellows, John Gardner, everybody else in the administrations, Republican or Democrat, really want from this is that as all of you future fellows emerge from the fellowship, you have gone through an accelerated leadership development for yourself. And it's not self-centered. It's that we literally want this very special class of a cohort of 11, 19 leaders to go on and change the communities, the programs, the industries that they go back to. And, my fellows here, Janet included, I think we all did that in our own unique ways and are still doing it. What I usually say to the new fellows classes, there's three things you want to get out of a fellowship experience. The one is learn from your principal. So whoever your secretary is or director of an organization. The second is, like Jeff said, get into your cohort, really establish this relationship. They become lifelong friends, learn from them. And the third is really come away with an understanding and appreciation of the value of what the federal government does at scale, scope, and substance. To Janet's question about the military, as you saw, the only federal employees who can apply for the fellowship are active duty, National Guard, or Reserve military. In my class, we had 17 total fellows, 3 were military, 2 Navy, and I was the 1 Army. The rest of the 14, the majority were business, but we had legal, medical, education, nonprofit. We had an AmeriCorps director as well. What was really cool is to see these, and a lot of were business consultants. They would go into these big organizations, and they would be, nothing against you McKinsey types out there. They go in there with the McKinsey way. They go in there with the McKinsey way, thinking I'm gonna solve HHS or Department of Labor or something of that nature. And it was a two-way street. So they would go in there, they would add some contributions to there. That wasn't the reason that they went there, but it would just naturally come. But what was cool is you could see the reverse effect that it had on the business leaders because they really cared about the United States of America. But what they really understood is, wow, scale, scope, and service. And probably we all have our favorites in our class. Michelle Peluso was my White House Fellow classmate. She served as a deputy to Alexis Herman, who was the Secretary of Labor. She did that for a year plus. She comes out 2 years later. She was my classmate, Michelle Peluso, was the CEO of Travelocity, and is now is the CEO of CVS Healthcare. So it's a two-way street. The military part, our job as military fellows is to make sure that you get to see direct service. We went on board the U.S. carrier Theodore Roosevelt. I took them down to Fort Polk, the Joint Training Readiness Center, and we were doing, this was pre 9/11, we were doing counterinsurgency effectively, doing door entries and things of that nature.
Door entries.
Yes, and you crawl in the mud and do all those things. So I think it is kind of fun to go on board a carrier, but it's more that the civilians get to see, we love the United States of America, but we haven't seen direct service in this particular way through the military.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much. I would just say that in our class, Jeff's in my class, similarly, we had 4 members of the military, and I had a background with a family member in the military, a close one, my dad. But others, we had a couple of members of our class who really had never encountered someone who was in direct service, as you say, John. And I think it was transformative for those people. And they came away with greater understanding and probably at least one of them I know is probably the biggest fan so far of the military and all that they do. Thank you. Let me move on to Warren. Warren, you're an educator, CEO, as you said in your introduction, of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. So impressive and important. And I'd like to let the audience know that this is Dr. Morgan, who actually has a doctorate in urban educational leadership. So this is not someone who's dabbling. So Warren, we've talked about the White House Fellowship being this tremendous opportunity for learning. And John just gave a good, made some good points about the ways fellows learn during the year. Could you speak to the different modalities, your own experience or how you saw others in your class learning? What are the ways in which people learn as a White House Fellow?
Thank you for that question, Janet. So the fellowship has 3 main components. The first component is your work placement, which, when you're in this process now and you're thinking about applying for the program, that's the thing that's top of mind. Where am I going to be working? What type of assignments am I going to be doing? Is it going to be, close to the president or which cabinet secretaries? And even though there's some phenomenal parts of the work placement, I would say the other 2 components are probably for me, they were the most life-changing. And that the second component is the education program, your speakers that you get, the class trips that you take, and then also some of the leadership development that you get. So that's all part of the education program. And then the third part is your fellows, which was my favorite part, just learning from your classmates. You get a year while you're in DC, and you get the opportunity to learn about different experiences and different perspectives. And sometimes you'll be the only one in your class from your field. So like for me in particular, I was the only educator in my class. And so just learning about that, and not only just being an educator, I've always worked in urban education. I'm from Chicago. I've worked in Chicago public schools. Actually, when I did the fellowship, I was before I did the fellowship, I was a network superintendent for this district. And I would have never imagined that I would be coming back to be the CEO. So it just shows the different components and the ways that the fellowship can invest in you. But those are the 3 main components of the fellowship. And in my year, I happened to be placed at the Department of Education, but it was a transition year. And so in a transition
And when you
year,
say transition, maybe explain that.
yeah, because this class is being selected will be a transition.
Well, actually,
No,
actually,
this class it
sorry,
is
actually, the one that has started
their transition. Yeah,
this past month. But go ahead. It will
yeah,
certainly not be a boring year, even though
exactly.
when
Yeah,
we say, to let the audience know, when we say transition, we mean one president to the next.
to the next. Yeah,
And
So this class
sometimes
is
it's particularly exciting if it's one president, a president of one party moving and handing the reins to the president of another party.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
most
please.
definitely. Yeah, and thanks for that correction, Janet. Yeah, this class that just started, they are transition fellows, which it's a really unique experience because, as I mentioned, I started in the Obama administration and then finished out the year in the Trump administration. And I was placed in the office of the secretary at the Department of Education. So worked really closely with John King, traveled with them, staffed different trips. But it wasn't until March until Secretary DeVos was appointed. And so the first 3 months of the Trump administration really carrying on some of the old projects, but then also really figuring out ways of where my leadership skills could be used. And that's one of the unique things about a transition year because it is almost like starting over. And in some cases, some of my classmates actually changed their placements as the year went on. But it's less about what you're actually doing and how you're learning. And every moment is a learning experience, whether it is, who you can talk to, what other classmates you can learn from, and also just taking the notes from your the education program. All of that is learning, even if you have a change in the presidential administration.
Right. No, beautifully stated, beautifully stated. And now finally we have Travis. Hi, Travis.
Hi, Janet.
Travis, I know you worked for President George W. Bush, and you were in the final, you wrapped up your fellowship, I guess, in September of his final fall, right?
Correct.
Right. And a little bird told me, Travis, that you experienced one educational modality, a learning modality, that few fellows in 60 years of the program's history have had the opportunity to experience. And it involved wheels and pedals. And we hope, since you've been a public safety professional much of your life, we hope helmets were used. Would you mind giving the audience a behind the scenes, just a look at how it happened that you came to cycle with George W. Bush, and what that experience was like for you, and maybe go ahead. I'll leave it at that.
So thank you. Yeah, I was a fellow in 2007 in the last full year of the George W. Bush administration. And I came from the state of Washington, where I was a state trooper. I was a lieutenant in charge of Homeland Security here. And sort of my message that helped me get selected was bridging the gap between the federal government, who was granting all the post 9/11 grants to the state and local, and I was the pass-through in the state of Washington. And similar to some earlier comments tonight, sort of playing both sides of the field. At the local level, I was hearing from my local counterparts about how frustrating it was to get all of this money, but have all these strings attached. And at the federal level, I was hearing from my counterparts up there that they were frustrated that the locals didn't know what they were doing with the money. So I thought I was going to go to Washington, D.C. and fix everything and figure that out. What you learn is that there are all these controls placed and put in place for reasons, and you learn how to work within that system. One of the things that, Janet, you mentioned, and it's funny you say that because I had written down as a note when I was watching the video, is you see those very stiff videos and pictures with the president in the Oval Office and everybody's in their uniform and suit and tie. But really what you don't see is all the conversations that every class has with the president of the United States and the vice president of the United States and Supreme Court justices that are behind the scenes. and all the cabinet secretaries and all the other guests that we meet with, and they're off the record conversations where there is no question that is off the table. And it's a remarkable opportunity to have those experiences. And the one unique one that I had is I had an opportunity. I competed in an Ironman triathlon and was teaching mountain biking to youth at a youth camp, and had heard that President Bush had transitioned from a marathon runner, to a mountain biker. And he had in the past invited a White House fellow class to ride with him. So I'd asked the director at the time, Janet Eisenstadt, if there was a possibility that I might be able to ride. And she said, well, yes, but can you send me your resume? And I said, well, you know everything about me after the background.
Right. I'm an open book.
He wanted my athletic resume. So I put something together and sent it in. And sure enough, I got an email from the personal assistant to President Bush asking me if I wanted to join on a mountain bike ride. And each weekend that he was in town, he would travel 1 or 2 days, either down to a local Army base or up to the Secret Service Academy, and we would ride together. There was a group of about 10 or 15 of us that would ride on any given day with the president. And, you know, again, you get hear these behind the scene conversations and be very intimate conversations and personal conversations with leaders of the country at all different types of levels. And that extended beyond the fellowship. We traveled to Kennebunkport, and we traveled to Crawford, Texas, and
wow.
we do that probably 40 or 50 times over the course of a couple of years. So it was very unique, and I feel very honored and privileged to have been able to participate in it.
That's terrific. And let me just say that doesn't happen to everyone. Yeah. But Travis, I could think of no more deserving fellow to have that kind of great connection, because I know you and your wife, you've had a real connection with the Bush family, and that's exciting. And many of us as fellows, you're interacting with human beings. People say, what's it like to work at the highest levels of government? But the fact is, you're working with human beings. And so you're sometimes asked to do things you might think this is, you know, a light task. I once had to carry on an airplane a hanging bag worth, filled with clothing for the First Lady to a big event because the weather had changed. These are minor things, but what that led to was a whole evening with the family, the Clintons, and my getting to ride on the big aircraft back to the home base. And these are just minor things. They're, I don't know that I'd categorize them, Dr. Morgan, as serious educational experiences, but they're fun. And they make for great stories, because your family back home, the people who supported you, your colleagues, your teachers who cheered you on through the application process, they want to hear too how it's all gone. So thank you, Travis. I'd like now to move to a few questions from the audience. And let me ask, I'm going to kind of draw from one of them and expand it a bit. Let me ask John, is there anything that surprised you about the fellowship that you were not expecting, and were you happy about it, or maybe not so much?
You know, thanks, Jen. One of the things that, and obviously I've now seen this as the Deputy Secretary or two at the third largest federal department, 250,000 people strong. But back then, I don't think I had a full appreciation, certainly not as a United States Army major. And I think one of the fellows sort of alluded to this, which is we as Americans, as U.S. citizens, sort of believe that, the White House, Congress, the, legislative branch, judicial branch, they're taking care of government, but we may not necessarily agree with how they're doing it or what they're doing, but it's going to work. What surprised me, and I was in the U.S. Trade Representative's office, so I was in the Executive Office of the President. We were doing NAFTA, WTO, domestic steel issues, things of that nature. And I wasn't super close to it, but I was pretty close to it because I did National Economic Council. I did deputies meetings. I was staffing. How much the enormity, both in substance and scale, that all has to go to the President of the United States, and that the interagency process that surrounds it has to be diligent, has to be structured, and has to be thoughtful, and has to be staffed by both career civil servants and by political appointees. But we ask a lot in this nation of our President of the United States and of our Vice President of the United States of America. And you will get a chance to see how that works. And it is literally the biggest company. I get Amazon and, you know, X and everything like that. But it is the most powerful business probably in the world. And you would have a chance, if you become a fellow, to see that in operation and how that all filters up literally to one person at the end of the day. For me, obviously, it was Bill Clinton.
Yeah, it's amazing, that funnel. I mean, it's either a pyramid mountain going this way or the funnel coming down. It is tremendous that seeing that process of how, you know, what goes into teeing up a decision that must be made by the President of the United States. It's pretty awesome and exciting to be a part of it. We have a question here about whether someone can get through the fellowship year as a mom. I might toss this to Vanessa because this is an individual who is in the healthcare industry herself. This person seems to, it does have a busy load of work. Can you comment on that, or anybody else who had moms in their class?
We had a lot of moms. I'm not a mom, but what we did as a class as well, we supported each other. So if there was something that was going on, they went ahead. I don't know if they needed childcare at the last minute, they would call one of us and we would help and just chime in.
Great.
Honestly, everybody's placement worked well with them.
That's great.
Yeah, I had Sharon, I mean, I recall Sharon Kiley, one of her classmates, 3 kids at that time.
Yep.
And we were very supportive. Her husband was supportive. It worked out. And then the fellowship understood. So.
Yeah. And we even, if you recall, Angela Diaz in our class, she had her 3 children, and one of those children was just recently is the spouse of a White House fellow. So it can become a family affair. But I found it really supportive of, and it wasn't just moms, it was dads too, brothers, sisters. People really care about each other, which is terrific. I'd like to ask, let me ask Travis. Travis, you went back to the Washington State Patrol, and you dedicated a number of additional years to that organization. And then you made a switch. You're now working in the private sector, yes?
Yes.
Could you speak a little bit about how you think what you gained through the fellowship, and possibly what you've drawn from the alumni experience in that community? How have those things supported you in making that transition?
So as I mentioned, I was a police officer when I became a White House Fellow. So obviously service was a big part of my life. And I finished my career with the State Patrol 28 years and retired from there. But when I came back from the fellowship mid-career, it emboldened me and enlightened me on additional service, because you spend your fellowship year learning about how state, local, and federal government is an infrastructure, but really what makes a difference is the people in the communities making a difference every day and starting different things and contributing in different ways. And this, you learn this at the local level and the international level and everything in between during your fellowship year. And so when I came back, I started volunteering on a variety of different boards, from a credit union board to a salary commission board. I was promoted into a position, in an HR position at work at the State Patrol. And all of those things sort of collaborated in my future favor when I retired from the patrol, because I had the experience of the White House Fellows Program and learning about the way relationships can be formed and then cultivated across so many different sectors. And so, yes, I went into the private sector. I work for a healthcare company now. I do HR and facility management for them. And it's been a great transition for me. I've been there 4 years now and thoroughly enjoy, serving at a different level in a different way.
Yes.
Yeah, so the White House Fellowship was very much a inflection point for me in that regard.
That's really great to hear. It's very interesting that you do learn about different forms of service.
Yes.
And this is related to what John was talking about, that you have direct service, military officers, but then the military, members of the military, members of the police community learn about other forms, and civilians also learn.
Hey, Jenna, can I do a quick follow-up on that?
Yeah, please.
So, I love what Travis said, which was, as he appreciated, Travis is already dedicated. He was doing direct service as a state trooper in the state of Washington. But then he went back, and then he came back and said, where do I take this scale and scope that I saw? And he appreciated what the federal government's role was. And it has to be, sort of national, state, local, tribal, territorial. The other cool thing, and it's no guarantee, but what I think ends up happening often for civilian fellows is actually in the majority is they see and they understand what the federal government can and should do. That's two different words. Can is empirical, so what can they get done on the mission? And then should is normative. And just in the first year, Vanessa knows this, in the first year of the Biden-Harris administration, I walked in and there were 6 White House Fellow alums across about probably 5 to 10 years of years who were either were the number 2s at the organizations. Me at Homeland Security, you have Jeff Prescott at USUN, John Feiner, the Deputy National Security Advisor, Ann Nurberger, the Deputy National Security Advisor for Cybersecurity. My fellow classmate, Carlos Del Toro, was the Secretary of Navy, and there were like 4 or 5 others. And of course, you saw it in the sizzle reel that Janet played, but Colin Powell, is a very good example. You have Denny Blair, 4-star Navy Admiral. You have Wes Clark, 4-star General. But it's replete with those. Lane Chow, Department of Transportation. So thanks.
No, it's great. It's great. There's a long line. There's both history, as we saw in the sizzle reel, but there's also the opportunity to actually work with some of those folks who came before you. It's not just that you can perhaps send them an email and say, I understand you were a fellow 20 years before me. Could I get advice? You might actually walk into an organization and find that person right there. And that can be an exciting opportunity. I've actually worked for a couple of White House Fellows in organizations after the fellowship. We have a question here that I'd like to toss to Vanessa and then perhaps Warren. Was there anything that occurred during your year that was uncomfortable for you? And you can be brief and the answer can be no.
You want to go ahead first?
Warren.
There it is. Yeah. I would say uncomfortable. I would just say transition years are tough. They're in, and I'm sure they're going to be doing lots of seminars for this current class that are transition fellows, but we had several transition seminars about what to do in a transition year. We didn't know, there was just a lot of unknowns when the program is changing. Our fellowship director changed like 3 times
really
in our fellowship year. So there was just a lot of change. So I wouldn't say uncomfortable, but it was a lot of change. And part of the thing that you learn as a fellowship is making the most of your year, because you make your year. And so we were still able to do incredible trips. We did our international trip. We were still able to gain a lot from our work placement, but there were times, especially when the when the administration was getting set up, where you would feel like, well, I have nothing to do in the office. What am I doing? And that's when one of the things we learned during the education program is, what list of people can you, they could be career people, or they could be other principals within the department that you may want to, have coffee meetings with. Being very intentional about your own learning, using your fellows to make your journey even better. So I wouldn't say it was a challenge or uncomfortable, but it was hard.
Yeah. Right. Thank
most,
you.
The most uncomfortable part about it is its personal growth. And it really wasn't until like John spoke to us, Elaine Chow, and they said, this is a learning fellowship. And that was really hard for, I was a PA during the pandemic who infused 13,000 patients in a day in and day out. And then I'm also, I call Mexican Catholic guilt, where I was ready to go. Let's go. What am I going to do in DC? And it was like, no, you need to sit down and learn. And that was hard for me. And once y'all gave me, my fellows who were speaking to us, gave me that permission to learn, I was good.
That's great. That's beautifully put. Thank you. Thank you. I want to toss out the general topic for any of y'all to address of the nonpartisan nature of the fellowship. How did y'all experience that? Anybody want to comment? Jeff?
Well, I actually, as a fellow, I ended up staying on. So I crossed between both the Clinton administration and the Bush administration. And I'd like to, you kind of have been hearing this a little bit. John Tien talked about the enormity of the federal government. I'd actually like to talk about, it turns out especially when you look at the presidential of the branch, it's really the people there are committed to public service.
Yeah.
And regardless of the politics that you see on the news, at the end of the day, I find, especially the career servants, civil servants, their goal is to try to do what's right for society and what's right for the overall country. And that what really impressed me also. You think that you watch CNN, it looks like it's politics and people throwing bombs and the whole thing. Goal of the presidential administration is to really try to do what's right. And the truth, quite frankly, is somewhere in the middle most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I echo exactly what Jeff said, especially going from the Obama to the Trump. And people asked every day, like, how was that? Was it really crazy? What was that transition like? And it gave me a lot of hope in our country and the way our government is set up. Because as Jeff mentioned, there are several career politicians. There's just a lot of systems that are put in place that gives me a lot of hope for any transition. And there was a lot of great learning and great people in both administrations to learn from.
Oh,
here's the other thing, Janet, too, and I can speak to this as a principal, like as a person who I actually had 3 fellows: Coast Guard, CISA, Homeland Security Advisor, then in the Office of the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary. Once you all become fellows, the White House Fellows Office, right? So the director, hopefully they don't change out 3 times like they did for Morgan. But no matter what, there's actually guidance and guidelines that tell us as the principals, this is a nonpartisan program. It's a leadership program, and it has such a great reputation. President Clinton, you saw these others talking about it. So it is very much nonpartisan. In fact, then as a former fellow, I would say to Jen Easterly, the head of the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, and others, a fellow political appointee. They are, at the end of the day, someone said you're a GS-14 in here. You are a civil servant, but with the opportunity, with the learning and leadership fellowship, and that's the guidance that is given. And you are not given, just like in the military, we're not given political tasks, whether a fellow or just on the NSC.
What did you say? Political tasks?
You're not given political tasks, right?
I see.
And in fact, you won't be in. Look, you can't. Sometimes you're going to be in a conversation that has political overtones. But those are sort of outside. They're political just because they become policy and they sort of split over. But you're not given those tasks. You're given hardcore work tasks to get it done on an economic policy, or for me, it was a trade policy.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we need to wrap up there. And thanks to the audience for all your questions, and thanks to Elizabeth and Mac for handling a good number of them. There's never enough time, but I'd like now to share the screen again to talk about, can y'all see that? It's okay? Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. To talk a bit about additional resources that are available to you so you can learn more. Key websites, the White House website, their main site, and you'll see the Get Involved Fellows. You can also go to the site and just search White House Fellows. There is some very basic information about the program, but it's limited. What's really important about this site is that is where the application is posted, and it goes live on November 1st. The White House Fellows Foundation and Association website, which is the organization of the alumni. Each of us is a member of that group that's speaking to you tonight. WHFF.org. It's WHFF because initially it was just, the name was White House Fellows Foundation, but we're also an association. In any event, this website has lots of great information about eligibility rules, selection criteria, and really really detailed guides to the selection process. And we have, in the past couple of years, we started in 2020 because of COVID, and Vanessa, hearing your experience is amazing, thinking back to that time. We started doing these webinars because we couldn't get together and do our traditional recruiting events for the White House Fellows Program. People used to go out to university campuses or go to professional society meetings to talk about the fellowship opportunity, but we went online. And then a couple years later, we developed a set of videos that demystify, if you will, particular components of the selection process. And there's one coming up on the written application itself, demystifying that. And that will occur on November the 8th. So I encourage everyone to look out for news about that. It'll be posted on the website and on our LinkedIn page. There is a detailed frequently asked question component of this website that I encourage everybody to read, because you really don't want to waste your time filling out that pretty serious application and find out January 2nd, as you're about to hit send or submit, that maybe you missed something basic about the program. Because I will say that when you go through the selection process and it begins with the written application, you need the people who are reading what you write or interviewing you at the regional or national levels. They want to know that you have a grasp of what the program is about. And you'll gain a lot of good information in that FAQ and on that website generally. There's information on the history, and there are great profiles of alumni who have gone off and continued to do tremendous things for their communities and the country. We also have on social media a really active presence on LinkedIn and Instagram. And if some of y'all want to direct your cameras here to this slide, please do so. You can also find this information on the Foundation Association website. And then finally, if any of you want to raise a question with the White House Fellows Program Office, the ones who administer the program, you can use this email address. I'd like to conclude now by thanking everyone on the panel for your contributions. Our behind the scenes magic workers, Jen and Mac and Elizabeth, and every one of you in the audience who took the time to join us this evening. And we all hope that many more people will be able to watch this webinar because it's been recorded and it will be posted online and shared via social media. Our hope is that tonight will be of value to many. We thank each of you who did join us live tonight. And I just want to say that seeing this level of interest in the program that we have in the registration over recent days and in the showing online tonight, I think is a great sign to all of us, certainly who've spoken to you tonight, as we navigate difficult times politically in the country. It's a great sign that so many people are committed to service, to learning more about the government and investing in themselves so that they can be of greater value to their communities and their nation. That is inspiring. And so what that motivation that brought you here tonight, please develop it and go forth and contribute even greater things. So thank you very much. Good night.